Keek on the mic, keek on the mic. Keek on the mic, keek on the mic. People, this the intro. Sacramento, California, born and raised. And Antelope is where I spend most of my days. Talk bad about my team, you must be a clown. This is Keek on the mic, so you know you better bear down. Bear down.
Hey, what's going on, Bears fans? Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of Keek on the Mic, the podcast all about the Chicago Bears. Like always, if you're new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. So really fun topic for you guys today right here on Keek on the Mic, as report out of Chicago is this. Insider reveals that the DK Metcalf door remains open for the Chicago Bears. Obviously, everyone knows that the Chicago Bears are in the process of reconstructing their roster, and Ryan Poles is doing his best to try to make that happen, but he knew that he couldn't do it all at once. But the one area of the roster that most Bears fans are still upset about is the wide receiver position, especially when you look at it. The only notable additions for the Chicago Bears this offseason was Byron Pringle and Velus Jones Jr. via the draft. And that's why many Chicago Bears fans are urging the team to make a run at DK Metcalf. After trading away Russell Wilson, there was a lot of speculation that the Seahawks may, in fact, also trade DK Metcalf, because if you trade your franchise quarterback in Russell Wilson, why would you need DK Metcalf? But so far, nothing has happened, and most believe that the Seahawks won't trade DK Metcalf. But Brady Henderson of ESPN feels like the door still may be open for a DK Metcalf trade. This is what he had to say about the situation. Metcalf surprisingly skipped mandatory minicamp in an apparent statement about his unsettled contract situation. The Seahawks are still optimistic about extending him, but it doesn't seem like a slam dunk given how costly the receiver market has become. And you know what? I truly feel that Henderson is right on the money with this. Obviously, when you look at the receiver market, it is sky high. Receivers are starting to get huge contracts in the NFL. So paying big money, given the Seahawks roster situation right now, it may seem unlikely that the Seattle Seahawks will, in fact, extend DK Metcalf. They could wait it out and then possibly maybe franchise tag him next year, but that also seems unlikely. So it may not make much sense for the Seattle Seahawks to, in fact, try to extend DK Metcalf. Plus, when you look at the Seahawks situation, they're kind of like in the same boat as the Chicago Bears. They just traded away their franchise quarterback and Russell Wilson. So they're getting to the point where they're about to be in a huge rebuild. The one thing that the Chicago Bears have over the Seattle Seahawks right now is a franchise quarterback, right? We have Justin Fields. Right now, I think they only have Drew Lock in that trade. So they don't have a guarantee quarterback in that organization. So it makes a lot of sense for the Seattle Seahawks to say, you know what? It may suck in the long run. It may hurt to get rid of DK Metcalf, but at the same time, you can get rid of that big contract. You won't have to worry about extending him to that massive contract that he's about to get, and you would probably get a whole lot of draft compensation, and you would save money in the long run. So, yes, it will hurt right now for the Seattle Seahawks, but I think Brady Henderson is right on the money. I just don't think it makes too much sense for the Seattle Seahawks to try to extend DK Metcalf because of their current situation. But when you start looking at the Chicago Bears, and if it makes sense for them to try to trade for DK Metcalf, it could possibly make sense, especially when you look for one. I just mentioned it a couple of seconds ago in the podcast. We have Justin Fields, so we have hopefully our future franchise quarterback in Justin Fields, where his big arm and his deep accuracy makes him an ideal fit for a downfield threat like DK Metcalf. Obviously, Metcalf is 6'4", so he's big, he's fast, he gets downfield in a hurry, he has good run after catch ability as well. He is just the total package, so that would make sense. And then plus, you look at the Bears cap situation. They are going to have over $90 million in cap space in 2023. So if the Bears did in fact trade for DK Metcalf, they would be able to extend him to make sure he is there to be Justin Fields' number one wide receiver for years to come. So obviously the benefits of this trade could be huge for the Chicago Bears, especially when you look at it. You add a guy like DK Metcalf, and then you already have Darnell Mooney. So adding Metcalf and already having Mooney, that would give Justin Fields a lethal duo to actually throw to. So I think a lot of Bears fans, when you look at it in that perspective, like, okay, yeah, that does make a lot of sense. Plus, you have a guy in Metcalf. Once again, he's only 24 years old, has averaged over 1,000 yards during his first 3 seasons, and has hauled in 29 touchdowns. So overall, when you look at DK Metcalf, he is the total package, and something that I think most fans would beg Ryan Poles to do. Go, if you really believe in Justin Fields. This is what Bears fans would say. If you really believe that Justin Fields is a guy, go get him as number 1 wide receiver in DK Metcalf. But, and there's always a huge but, a DK Metcalf trade would go against the identity of new Chicago Bears GM Ryan Poles. And let me explain what I mean when I say that. Ryan Poles isn't a fan of making bold moves like this. Obviously, if Ryan Pace was still our GM, I truly feel that DK Metcalf would possibly already be a Chicago Bear right now. But we have to understand that this isn't Ryan Pace. This is a new regimen and Ryan Poles running the show now. And this is a guy that wants to build through the draft. He doesn't want to get rid of draft capital. He feels that the best way to build a team is building through the draft and developing those guys. I'm not saying that any of the receivers in these next couple of drafts are going to be as good as DK Metcalf. What I'm saying is Ryan Poles, and he said this many times, that he wants to build through the draft and develop those guys. Yes, getting DK Metcalf right now would probably help us win a couple of games right now. But then in the long run, it may hinder the overall plan that Ryan Poles is trying to accomplish. By getting rid of draft capital, that would only give the Chicago Bears 5 picks in next year's draft. So, yes, you now have your number 1 wide receiver, but you're probably going to have to give up multiple first-round picks in order to get DK Metcalf. And when you look at it in that perspective, it's really hard to build a franchise when you keep giving away draft capital. So when you look at it in that perspective, it makes a lot of sense. And don't get me wrong, I would really like to see DK Metcalf in a Chicago Bears uniform. I definitely feel that would help Justin Fields' development. It would give him a big number 1 wide receiver to throw to. Obviously, once again, I'm going to repeat this till I'm blue in the face. Pairing Metcalf and Mooney together, already having Velus Jones and Byron Pringle on the roster, that would be a really nasty group of wide receivers for Justin Fields to throw to. That would be amazing to see in this new Chicago Bears offense. But when you really break it down and look what Ryan Poles is trying to do, he's trying to build a consistent winner. Obviously, when you look back at when we traded for Khalil Mack, for example, we were good for that 1 season, and then what happened? We kind of fizzled out, right? That could be the same thing that could happen if we traded for DK Metcalf. We may be decent when we get him. Maybe Justin Fields blows up, right? But we're still not winning football games, right? We may be good for a little bit, but then the long-term perspective of what Ryan Poles is trying to do may fail. So, yeah, we may shock some teams and go to the playoffs for 1 year, but then once again, we're not creating that consistent winner, right? Because then we may fizzle out. And then now, hey, look, we're ass out of some draft picks. So when you look at what Ryan Poles is trying to do, a DK Metcalf trade actually seems unlikely in the long run. And don't get me wrong, I would love to see DK Metcalf in a Chicago Bears uniform, but you have to understand what Ryan Poles is trying to do here for this football team. He's trying to create a consistent winner. So I can respect what he's trying to do. He's not a man that is willing to make bold moves like this. And I know that a lot of Chicago Bears fans won't agree with that, but I guess you have to respect what he's trying to do for the Chicago Bears football team. So let's have a debate here on the podcast. I'm going to ask you guys this question. Do you guys think that Ryan Poles should pull the trigger and make a trade for DK Metcalf? Let me know down below in the comment section. But before I let you guys go, make sure you hit that subscribe button and the bell notification to catch all Bears content right here on the podcast. Make sure you follow me on all my social media platforms, and make sure you share this episode of Kick on the Mic with every single Bears fan that you know. But other than that, I'll be back for an all-new Bears podcast right here on Kick on the Mic. Thanks, guys, and bear down.
You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic. You can go and subscribe, cause I be on it right. You ain't bout it, you ain't bout it, you ain't kick on the mic.